Prime Minister Mottley says Barbados is happy to host talks between Venezuela's government and the opposition and calls for a peaceful resolution. 90 more Venezuelan migrants choose to fly home from Ecuador under the Return to the Homeland plan. And a rescue ship saves more than 40 migrants, including children, adrift in the Mediterranean. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Talks between the Venezuelan government and the opposition are continuing for a second day in Barbados. Prime Minister Mottley says Barbados is happy to be able to facilitate this dialogue with the backing of the government of Norway.
Talking to local media, Prime Minister Mottley said the government of Barbados, along with other CARICOM governments, are clear that the time for dialogue is never over. We would want to see a very peaceful resolution to the problems in Venezuela. She went on to say, we are aware of the humanitarian crisis and equally that you can't have intervention that is in breach of the Charter of the UN or OAS. And she asked the media not to chase after the Venezuelan negotiators. Let the people talk. Let the people be in peace. Don't go looking for them. The fact that they have chosen Barbados is a recognition that we can facilitate this kind of discussion without the kind of pressure that they may face elsewhere.
The Venezuelan government, of course, does not accept that the situation in Venezuela can be classified as a humanitarian crisis, as the opposition alleges. When the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, visited Caracas last month, and later, in reply to her report, the Foreign Minister Jorge Arraza and other government leaders made clear that U.S. sanctions and other economic measures against Venezuela are to blame for inflicting suffering on the people. As talks proceed in Barbados, many Venezuelans are waiting anxiously for the results, and most agree that any solution has to come from within the country. It cannot be imposed from abroad.
As always, the objective of the Venezuelan government is to strengthen its diplomacy for peace, while the White House continues to pursue its violent plans for Venezuela. Since 2013, there have been more than 600 calls for dialogue in a framework of reconciliation and respect for sovereignty. Now the talks are in Barbados, as the Minister of Communication announced in a communiqué posted on social media. According to this analyst, the new round of talks show the government's commitment to prevent intervention.
The Venezuelan right is a very bad investment for the United States. It is in every sense an opposition without solid social or political roots. It's completely discredited. It doesn't want dialogue. It has no project for the country. So if the US government has any sense, it should really engage in this dialogue.
Since January, there has been no let-up in the violent plans against Venezuela of the opposition and the international right wing. But President Nicolas Maduro has stuck to his insistence on talks.
We need to show the world that we need peace and calm, that we don't want any kind of war. The only war we face is the one imposed on us by the North American Empire.
As the government insists, the solution must be a Venezuelan one.
President Maduro has always been very clear about one thing, that we recognize the problems we have, but that we can solve them among ourselves as Venezuelans, that no foreign power should come and tell us what we should do, that we should choose our own destiny.
The Venezuelan people are waiting to see what comes of these talks in Barbados, while on the streets, they continue to show their support for the revolution.
90 Venezuelan migrants living in Ecuador are now homeward bound under the Return to the Homeland program. The initiative, promoted by the Bolivarian government of Nicolás Maduro, was started in 2018 and has so far provided 32 flights for Venezuelans wishing to return home. Close to 3,000 Venezuelan nationals have been repatriated since the program began. Xenophobia, unemployment, and sexual exploitation in foreign countries have motivated the return of these migrants to their homeland.
Ha hecho un buen trabajo por nosotros.
The Venezuelan Foreign Ministry has done good by those of us who need to return home. Me personally, I have spent 2 years by myself, without seeing my wife, without seeing my children and grandchildren. I have hope that I will find work in Venezuela. I have faith in this.
Guyana's President David Granger has proposed the names of 8 nominees for the country's Elections Commission. The opposition and the government are meeting later on Tuesday to discuss the potential candidates. Among the nominees is retired Justice James Patterson, who recently resigned as Election Commission chairman. He did so after the CCJ ruled that the process which resulted in his appointment was flawed. A total of 19 nominees are up for the position, including 11 names resubmitted by the opposition leader. Antigua and Barbuda's government says it has received positive feedback to a proposal that would allow it to own at least 40% of the Scotiabank branch in Antigua. It's one of several Scotiabank branches in the Caribbean being acquired by the Trinidad and Tobago-based Republic Financial Holdings Limited. Prime Minister Gaston Brown says his administration had put 2 options on the table: that a consortium comprising his government and a group of domestic banks should be given the first option to buy the Antigua Scotia branch. The second option is to partner with Republic Bank, and in that case, Antigua would take up to 40% shares. We move to Argentina now, where since President Mauricio Macri rose to power in 2015, there has been a record increase in the external debt. It has gone from 57% of gross domestic product to 86%. Economists say capital outflow has played a major role.
More than half of the $190 billion of external debt went to capital flight. That's according to the Observatory of Foreign Debt of the Metropolitan University for Education and Labor. Capital flight is the rapid outflow of financial assets motivated by economic uncertainty.
Almost half of the debt went into capital flight. Then there are more covert methods, which saw the outflow of financial assets such as foreign companies that earn money in Argentina, but those profits went abroad. Argentina does not offer opportunities, is not reinvested. Banks, financial companies, and transnational companies take the money out of Argentina.
Recently, presidential hopeful Alberto Fernandez of the Frente para Todos claimed that the standby credit deal granted to Argentina under the IMF violates the 6th clause of the statute of the Washington-based organization.
Argentina received more money than the fund is allowed to lend in relation to Argentina's capital contribution to the fund. Plus, the fund has never financed capital flight. It is rare that this has happened. But the sentiment is that the United States is behind Macri's candidacy.
Out of the $39 billion already disbursed by the IMF in Argentina, $30 billion corresponds with capital flight.
In general, those who make capital flight a systematic practice are the richest in this country. They are accustomed to doing so, and that means that in Argentina there is almost a GDP abroad of the richest of this country, the presidential family, almost the entire cabinet, almost all the businessmen. You calculate that in Argentina, only half of businessmen pay their income tax. Where does the rest go? It goes to tax havens.
And while a few get richer, the vast majority of Argentinians remain exposed and vulnerable, and this deepens inequality.
This means a decrease in the quality of healthcare and education. We have seen this play out in Buenos Aires, where schools were without heating and the children had to use blankets. It also means adjustments in retirement plans. Additionally, there is a lack of a proper housing policy and a lack of public works policy. That is to say, an overall degeneration of living conditions.
Economists believe it's safe to say that the next government will have to shoulder the heavy debt burden.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 44 people, including a number of children, have been picked up from the middle of the Mediterranean Sea off Libya's coast. According to the humanitarian group CI, the Alan Kurdi migrant rescue ship was alerted to the plight of the migrants by Tunisian fishermen and a civilian search plane. CI also says a Maltese Navy ship is now on its way to take the people back to land. This is the second group of migrants rescued by the Alan Kurdi in the past week to be taken in by Malta. Nigeria's National Assembly was on lockdown after shots were fired nearby during clashes between police and Islamic movement protesters. Protesters demanded the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim Saksaki, who was arrested in 2015 for allegedly attempting to kill the army chief. Police say 2 officers have been shot and wounded, while 6 other lawmen were injured by individuals using clubs and stones. The police also says 40 protesters were arrested, but have not commented on allegations that 2 protesters were killed. Mobile internet services have been restored across Sudan following a court order ending 5 weeks of a blockade imposed by the ruling military council. The internet was blocked after a deadly crackdown on protesters camping outside the army headquarters in the capital, Khartoum. 2 weeks ago, a lawyer who challenged the internet blackout won his case, but services were restored for him alone until several people complained. The move comes days after the country's military reached an agreement with opposition leaders to share power until elections are held in 3 years' time.
Until now, it's not clear who ordered to cut the internet, and I have a lot of evidence that contradicts the statements made by the telecommunication body and the military council, which denied having any relation to this matter. Also, until now, no one has taken any responsibility of shutting down the internet.
The United Nations has commended African leaders for establishing the world's biggest free trade initiative. The United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed said the African Continental Free Trade Area was an integral move toward self-reliance. The African Union launched the world's largest free trade zone, while other world trade treaties are proving to be a failure. The United States has ditched the Trans-Pacific Partnership, while across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom is trying to extract itself from the European Union and its single market.
I think with the CFTA, that slog to get countries on board, the implications for actually producing the largest trade area, and it producing possibilities for us to now address internally as well as externally what you need to do to make that happen. So, with Nigeria, Benin coming in at the end yesterday, Eritrea saying, we're not going to be left behind, I think you have a continent on the move.
South Africa is set to help Zimbabwe overcome its power shortage crisis. Zimbabwe is struggling to generate enough energy to meet demand due to reduced water levels in Lake Kariba, the country's main power generating source. Just recently, the country managed to clear its outstanding debt with the South African power company Eskom. The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa held talks with the President of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, on the sidelines of the recent African Union meeting in Niger, where he expressed willingness to help in solving the power crisis.
Mnangagwa and I had a wonderful bilateral meeting where we discussed a variety of matters, and one of those was energy, because Zimbabwe has a shortage of energy at this point in time. They draw quite a lot of their energy from the Kariba Dam. Now they have been going through a massive drought, and the Kariba Dam water levels have gone terribly low, and so they need more energy. And as a result, they would like, obviously, South Africa to support them, but they have also been able to pay up the debt that they owed to Eskom. He confirmed that, and he said they would like, obviously, further support. And this is the type of thing that we are going to discuss with Eskom, because we've always exported energy to Zimbabwe and indeed to other neighboring countries.
South Africa's public broadcaster is struggling to stay on air. The government has been stalling on its promise for cash injection to ensure the broadcaster can pay employee salaries and provide a service for millions of South Africans. Our correspondent Mottley has a story.
The SABC is our eyes, our ears, and the mouthpiece of our nation.
I think TV and radio are an important part of building communities, and that's why paying your TV.
The South African government is the major shareholder of the SABC, and without its support, the broadcaster cannot carry out its mandate or even pay employee salaries. Communications Minister says she's not convinced the SABC has a sound turnaround strategy.
A responsive turnaround strategy that must give confidence not only to advertisers, not only to people who are listening to SABC, but to government and everyone that in the next 5 years or 3 years, SABC will not come back and ask for a bailout.
A union representative for workers told a panel discussion on SABC News that government is being disingenuous in its approach to the crisis.
The state as the main shareholder cannot keep us at ransom, because that's exactly what they are doing now. Last month we were complaining whether the salaries will come or not. We have not paid critical stakeholders like Centec, like your electricity bills and so forth. That shows that somehow SABC might be pressured to comply with whatever that we're not so sure what it is.
Another panelist believes the SABC is being manipulated into political pressure.
You know, it's been allowed deliberately to stay in a lurch from crisis to crisis to crisis to serve very narrow political ends. And this is the consequence of that, is that it hasn't been able to develop.
Every passing day means growing uncertainty for the SABC and its employees. If the SABC is forced into a blackout, it will mean information cannot reach millions who can't afford pay TV channels. Matuba Mahlachi, Telesur, Johannesburg.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Russian news agencies RT and Sputnik have been denied accreditation by the UK government for the Global Conference for Media Freedom in London after the UK accused them of spreading disinformation. The Russian Foreign Affairs Office has condemned this decision by the UK government and has demanded they provide concrete facts for their claims within 24 hours. Besides the claims by the UK's Foreign Office, the conference's media accreditation team has not yet provided a concrete evidence to support their claims. Promoted by the UK and Canadian governments, the Global Conference for Media Freedom is set to start on Wednesday and claims to defend media freedom and improve the safety of journalists who report across the world. A massive police operation took place in Turkey on Tuesday as the prosecutor's office handed down 176 warrants for current members of the armed forces who were supposedly President Erdogan. Our correspondent in Istanbul, Aitor Chavarri, has more.
On Tuesday, Turkish police began an operation at the request of the Turkish prosecutor's office to arrest 211 active soldiers for their alleged links to the failed July 2016 coup attempt here in Turkey. The petition arrived from the Istanbul prosecutor's office and accused these 211 people of having links with Fethullah Gulen, the Islamic preacher, which the government of Erdogan accuses of being the intellectual author of the failed coup attempt. The majority of people arrested come from the army, and among those arrested, there are several high-ranking officers. Since 2016, the Turkish government has pursued all people who have had links with Fethullah Gulen, since his group is considered as a terrorist group here in Turkey.
A 3-year-old girl killed during the police's ongoing war on drugs in the Philippines has been laid to rest. The girl was reportedly used by her father, an alleged narcotics dealer, as a human shield during a shootout with the police. Her death last week renewed criticism of the Philippines' brutal crackdown on drug addicts and dealers, which has so far killed around 6,000 people. The killing comes at a time when the United Nations Human Rights Council is set to vote on a resolution calling for an investigation of the killings committed in the Philippines drug war.
killings definitely is not the solution. And more killings is very, very alarming. So that's why we continue this campaign. And here, another 3-year-old victim. They say it's a collateral damage, but we say collateral damage, but we say it's not, because she was killed because of this war on drugs.
The Spanish prosecutor's office has demanded that Catalan President Quim Torra be barred from office for disobeying an order to remove a banner from the Catalan government building bearing the message, "Free political prisoners." President Torra did not remove the banner referring to the imprisoned leaders of the Catalan sovereignty movement at the first instance, as ordered by the Spanish Electoral Commission. The magistrate said that Torra continued to disobey. It says it will seek to impose a fine of nearly $35,000. The president's defense team said the court was not impartial. New Greek government ministers have been appointed after the victory of the right-wing New Democracy Party in the country's general election. The party of the new Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis won the election on a platform of privatization and cutting regulation. However, many analysts say that the previous leftist Syriza government lost because it promised so much but failed to deliver. Ireland is concerned about a disorderly Brexit and said it has already taken measures to protect itself from any eventual consequences. Speaking at a European Union ministers' meeting in Belgium, the Irish finance minister warned of the risk of a no-deal Brexit. The minister went on to express Ireland's commitment to the EU and hope for fresh support during Brexit talks. More than 3 years after a referendum to exit the European Union, it is not yet clear on what terms the UK will separate from the bloc.
From the point of view of the Irish government, we now believe that the prospect of a disorderly Brexit occurring is now a significant risk. And the Irish government is meeting today now to review our readiness for dealing with this great challenge. We see the European Union as being an absolutely essential element of the future development of Ireland and of our political and economic prospects. It has transformed our country, it is our home, and we have very strong commitments to the European Union that we will maintain.
Years after its creation in Cuba, Operation Milagro continues giving medical assistance to patients with vision problems across the world.
Juan Raúl Hernández is one of the hundreds of Cuban doctors who have participated in Operación Milagro. The ophthalmology program was promoted by Cuba's Fidel Castro and Venezuela's Hugo Chavez. Over the years, it has restored sight to almost 4 million people across 34 countries.
The prevention of blindness is one of the indicators of quality of life. Latin America has always had high care programs, but not like Operation Milagro, that has reached the most humble. Because of the high cost of operation, sometimes people have to decide whether they buy food or undergo an operation.
For Dr. Hernández, who has worked in 5 countries across the continent through the program, the training of doctors is crucial for continuing humanitarian projects like Operación Milagro. In the Ramón Pondo Ferrer Ophthalmology Institute, some 80 specialists from various countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are studying.
I'm from Bolivia. In my country, we have hospitals built through Operación Milagro where Cuban doctors work. I am on my 3rd year of studies. Soon I will graduate, but I would really like to stay in Operación Milagro in order to continue my training and helping those around me.
One of the founders of this project, Dr. Marcelino Rio, remembers how challenging it was to bring a quality service to people with low income.
This is the most important task Cuban ophthalmology has had in all its history. It's a project of international significance, but it has also invoked hatred in the region because local doctors say we are stealing their patients, something that's simply not true, because we have taken care of them like local doctors would never have. We are talking about people suffering from cataracts for more than 30 years.
Hundreds of specialists from the Institute of Ocular Microsurgery have participated in Operación Milagro, a project founded by the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, in 1988. This project guarantees access to ophthalmology professionals and also their training with advanced techniques.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesverenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesver English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.